Welcome to Lecture 8, Part 2 on Management Practices. This is part of the subject Agronomy 1. This subject is part of the Bachelor of Agriculture and Technologies and the Bachelor of Equine Studies. These degrees are offered at Melbourne Polytechnic, with the Bachelor of Agriculture and Technology being a partnership with La Trobe University. To find out more about this course and the other courses that we offer, please visit our website at www.melbournepolytechnic.edu.au. My name is Dr. Nikki Cooley. Before continuing with this slide, please ensure that you have watched Management Practices Part 1. This gives an overview of the main inputs required for agronomical management practices and will be useful for you to understand before you go on to this lecture. In this lecture we are going to concentrate firstly on an overview of Australian agriculture. We will then look more closely at agronomy and agronomical associated industries, particularly across the state of Victoria. When we are reviewing Victoria, we will do this on a district basis. So let us start with some generic facts about Australian agriculture. These are cited in the 2012 Farmers Federation report and can be found on your lecture notes. Economically, agriculture is important to Australia. At the farm gate, the agricultural sector contributes 3% to Australians' total gross domestic product, or GDP. The gross value of Australian farm production in 2009-10 was $48.7 billion. This profit comes from 134,000 farm businesses in Australia, of which 99% of these are owned by Australians. Each Australian farmer produces enough food to feed on average 600 people. Of these 600 people, 150 will be Australian, while 450 will be people living overseas. Australian farmers produce almost 93% of Australia's daily domestic food supply. And as of 2010-11, there was a little over 300,000 people employed in Australian agriculture. Let's look specifically at cropping. In Australia in 2010 and 11, there were 402 million tonnes of coarse grain produced. This was comprised predominantly of cereal crops such as barley, grain, sorghum, maize, wheat, oats and triticale. It covered 192.8 million hectares of Australian land. In Victoria, there was about 10% of this, 8.06 million hectares, designated to the production of grain. Over these 8.6 million hectares, there was 19.5 million tonnes of grain produced. So let's explore the state of Victoria in more detail. The facts come from the NFF Farm Facts Report in 2012 as well as from the Australian Bureau of Statistics Agricultural Commodities 2009-10 report, catalogue number 7121.0. In summary, livestock and cropping, along with grape production, is important to Victoria. There was about 3.7 million cattle, with the gross value of Australian cattle and calf production in 2009 and 10 valued at $1,276 million. Victoria has about 5,295 dairy farms, with a head of about 997,000 cattle. Sheep meat is produced in Victoria, and these are based across specialised sheep farms, and there are 3,338 of these recorded in 2009-10. These specialised sheep farms have an annual gross production value of $1,045.6 million. Wool production in 2011 in Victoria was just under 104,000 tonnes. The gross value of Australian wool is worth about $435.1 million. Moving on to the dried grape industry, in Victoria there are about 480 dried grape growers. 98% of Australians' dried fruit production is produced in the Mildura region of Victoria and New South Wales. Cropping is another important commodity, and for Victoria it can be separated predominantly via wheat, oats, some barley, some triticale, and a small amount of maize and sorghum. Wheat is by far the greatest production, with Victoria producing about 44.3 million tonnes over an area of 18 million hectares. Grains and oilseeds in Victoria are worth many millions. For example, barley is worth 332.5 million, oats 57.2 million, rice 0.1 million, wheat 648.2 million, with the other commodities adding up to a total of 17.1 million. Now let us look at a breakdown of Victorian regions. There are several ways you can separate or distinguish between areas in Victoria, but for the purpose of this lecture we shall just use some main districts. We will not cover the central Victorian district, as this is predominantly Melbourne, the CBD, and largely built up non-agricultural enterprises. In fact, much of this area is either now full of dwellings or is close to it. We will start by looking at the Mallee regions. Australian agriculture is largely dominated by rainfall or adequate water supplies. So for each of these areas, we will give a breakdown of rainfall, as this can largely determine what non-irrigated crops can grow in this region. For the Mallee region, there is a variation between 200 and 400 millimetres of rain on average per year. It is predominated by alkaline soils in general. The average farm size is approximately 1,400 hectares, and it does have a large component of irrigated farms. These irrigated farms are approximately 25 hectares. The Mallee region is a large region, and it is based on mixed farming enterprises. On a weight basis, cropping and livestock processing dominate in this area. Cropping paddocks are typically sown to cereals in rotation with pasture stubble paddocks for grazing of livestock. Between 2003 and 2004, there was a shift in the enterprise mix, with cropping increasing relative to livestock. according to the Dimas and Latte 2008 SARDI report. In 2007, about 80% of arable land was assigned to cereals, as stated by Wakefield in a 2007 PERSCOM. Ewing and Fludge in 2004 identified periods of economic advantage in the livestock during 2007, overcropping component of the mixed enterprises, and in part may explain the mix. The most profitable livestock is that of merino-based lamb and prime lamb production enterprises. This is according to 2005 Scarlett and Francis report. Broadacre cropping in the Mallee is dispersed, with about a biomass of 444,000 tonnes per year. Crop, stubble and associated grain processing predominates. There is some dispersed forestry and sawmilling, which includes farm and in-forest residues, pulpwood and sawmill residue at about 1,800 tonnes per year. There is some horticulture activities in the Mallee, again they are dispersed. Where pruning whole vegetables and fruit at 1,993 tonnes per year respectively. Stem and kernel residue, vegetable and fruit residue at about 5,288 tonnes per year. There is some marine and aquaculture producing aquaplant material in this region. There is some food processing and retail food remnants and residues. Milk-based residues and plant oils at 328 and 3,000 tonnes per year respectively. Industrial, commercial and domestic livestock production, mixed animal and plant biomass at 50,000 tonnes per year. Livestock production and processing in animal and parts pieces is at 965 tonnes per year. Manures is about 7,300 tonnes per year. Sludges at 872 tonnes per year, and haul animals at 644 tonnes per year. There is some post-processing of livestock production and processing at 104,000 tonnes per year. Most of this consists of animal biosolids, manure screenings and wood chip mixes. This data is based on the Mallee, Grain and Grey's final report in 2008 by Dimas and Latte. This is an RDV VicGov report. On the slide comes from the ABS data from the Agricultural Commodities Small Area Data Australia 2006 and 7 report. This data will be used for many of the districts in the next couple of slides. As you can see from this commodities figure, grapes at $270 million dominate the market in the Mallee region. This is followed by grains, almonds, milk, peaches, nectarines, some sheep and lambs, oranges, barley for grain, pastures and grasses for a small dairy industry, cattle and calves. Over time, trends can change in any one given region. Based on 2010 data, this showed that grapes, including fruits and nuts, are still dominating this area. These industries, the grapes, fruits and nuts for example, typically have a high return, and they therefore can afford the relatively expensive infrastructure that comes with irrigation. This is why and how these plants can grow in this area. It is only with the high return that you can get from the investment into grapes and nuts and fruits can you enable such a large value for this area. The low rainfall limits significantly limit how much cropping can be done and also how much livestock can be run. Let us look at the region of the Wirrama. This contains the well-known Grampians area. Rainfall in this area varies from 350 to 550, depending on whereabouts in the Wirrama your farm may be located. The average size of the farms is 880 hectares. Farming in this area is associated with broadacre cropping, wheat, barley. There is some sheep, some grapes. Wheat is predominantly Australian premium, white, for flatbreads and noodles. There is a small amount of fruit and canola grown in this area, as well as some vegetables where the rainfall is slightly higher. The livestock includes cattle and pigs and is predominated by sheep and lambs, which are worth 133 million to this area. For cropping, there is barley, oats, triticale, canola, lentils, chickpeas and faba beans, lupins, field peas and vetch. Many of these are used in rotations. Barley is by far the largest grain commodity, bringing in about 66 million in 06 and 07. You will also note that there are some cut flowers. This is worth 32 million and is certainly a growing industry. We now move south of the Wimmera area to the southwest Victorian area of Victoria. Large rainfall variation depending on where you are in the southwest of Victoria across this district. The rainfall can vary from 600 to a very respectable 1,600 millimetres. In this area there is a mix of milk, beef, sheep and seafood. Cereal and oil crops are increasing in their production in this area. At the breakdown of commodities for southwest Victoria, you'll see what's dominated by milk production at $680 million worth. This is followed by livestock, cattle and calves at 377 million, sheep and lambs slaughtered at 307 million. There is some wool production worth 195 million. This is followed by pastures and grasses. There is a small poultry commodity, along with the grains, barley and wheat. There is a small but growing cut flowers industry in southwest Victoria. Now let us look at the southeast of Victoria in the district of Gippsland. And is a temperate and generally humid area with a rainfall range from 600 to 1,050 millimetres per annum. There is a lot of variation around the state depending on where you are located. The rainfall indeed does reflect the enterprise. Gippsland is well known for its meat, milk, beef and sheep, and there is some deer production here. Cropping includes cut flower, vegetables, fruits and nuts. There are about 920 agricultural businesses in South Gippsland, accounting for 454,000 hectares of land, with cropping taking about 5,373 hectares, 122 hectares of nursery, cut flowers and cultivated turf, and about 2,011 hectares for vegetables for human consumption, 145 hectares for fruit and nuts. The number of animal production are high in this area, with approximately 256,000 hectares of sheep and lambs and 148,000 hectares of cattle. There are about 723 livestock pigs and some 1,140 deer. These are based on 2006-2007 ABS data. Now we will look at the northeast area of Victoria. This is also known as the Hume District. The northeast has about 2,832 agricultural businesses, over about 751,000 hectares. About 1,020 hectares is of non-cereal broadacre crops such as legumes for grain. There is about 36 hectares of nurseries, cut flowers and cultivated turf. There is about 1,885 hectares of fruit and nuts, and about 339,000 sheep, 477,000 cattle for all purposes. This is based on the Agricultural Commodities Small Area Data ABS report 2006-2007. The rainfall in this area is quite varied depending on whereabouts in the northeast you are located. At its minimum it's 629, at its uppermost its average is 1,250, thus producing a large range of crops. The predominant agronomical enterprise is livestock production, cattle and sheep, with cereal, fruit and nut and flowers grown in this area. The next region we will look at will be the North Central District. North Central has rainfall at around 527 to 850 millimetres. It is predominantly livestock production, cattle, sheep and cereals. To conclude this presentation on production and commodities in the state of Victoria, Australia, rainfall has a significant influence on the district and what commodity will result. It is also important to note that there are a great range of soil types across Victoria and the various districts. In the link on the handout on your first page, there was a link to a summary of Victorian soils. Please review when you have time. It is safe to say that there is a considerable variation of agricultural industries across Victoria, and many are either directly involved with agriculture or they are indirectly involved agronomy. This brings us to the end of this lecture.